Now, allow me to introduce our guests for this session. Joanna de Quintanilla, the VP and Principal Analyst at Forrester. Joanna is based in Amsterdam and serves customer experience professionals. Her areas of expertise include digital customer experience, tools like journey mapping, and agile methods. Joanna also focuses on brands and leads customer experience index research in Europe. Welcome, Joanna.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
And our other guest is Marien van der Heijden, Acting Global Head of CX and Global Head of CX Partnerships at Kantar. Maurice leads the Global CX practice and CX partnerships at Kantar, working with a global team of CX experts to define, track, and activate their customers' CX strategies. Maurice has been at Kantar for over 20 years, where he has worked in a variety of leadership positions across management, consultancy, and technology. Throughout his career at Kantar, Maurice has been instrumental in driving the development of new technology-based CX offers and bringing these to the market. Welcome, Maurice.
Thank you very much for the introduction.
Good to have you both here. Now, since the theme of this hour of the discussion is CXM Time Machine, I will try to travel through time together with you, and we will touch on the past, present, and the future, both of your professional development and of the customer experience industry itself. Before I start with the first question, I want to clarify that if anyone from the audience has a question, feel free to just send it over to in the Zoom box, or you can use raise a hand button, and then we'll put a spotlight on you. Now, my first question goes to Maurice. Are you ready?
I am indeed.
All right, since Time Machine, you would usually want to go to the past, so let's go back a little bit. So can you tell us your top achievements? What is it that you're proud of in your career?
Okay, well, so thanks very much, Alexandra and Vanessa, for inviting me. So yeah, first of all, I'm suitably old for this task, so that's well selected. So yeah, so that's really good. Unlike Ian Golding, who was on previously, I do have gray hairs because of CX, but all that is a by the by. So. And in all honesty, I actually hope that my top achievements will still be ahead of me, but I'm not sure about that, obviously. So
I should have added so far.
yeah. So far, yeah. So far. So as you said in the introduction, I've been in the CX game for over 20 years, and really, for me, the application of the right technology at the right time for our customers has been the highlight. So. And specifically in the last 5 years, you know, the ability to stay ahead, or at least in line with the technology curve in CX that we have seen, has been, you know, my real pride and joy, actually. So, but we shouldn't forget that in the end, this is all about, you know, our customers that we have and their customers. So, and for us at Kantar to stay relevant and impactful for our customers is important. So via applying the technology cleverly, and that is really likely my top achievement so far. So see, the background is that there are massive changes in the CX world, obviously. And it's always relatively easy from a services vendor like us to sell in something new and start something new and shiny and so on. However, you know, to drive ROI and business outcomes for a customer year after year, and to renew your approach whilst keeping the wheels turning, I think that is really the tricky and exciting bit as well. And the proof is in our clients. So we have many clients that we've had over a decade, where we started with voice of customer programs. We transformed them from voice of customer to full CX programs, and we have stayed super relevant in their business. So, and I think that is really the greatest achievement, you know, that our clients stay with us for such a long time.
Thank you for that. That's really good to hear. And of course, like you said, I do hope that the greatest achievement is in front of you, and not just yourself, but for everyone here. Now, Joanna, I'm going to ask you the same question, but before that, did I say the last name right, the Quintanilla?
Yes, that's great. Thank you so much. It's a scary point in the presentation often for people when they have to pronounce my name. So I appreciate you pronounced it perfectly.
I was doing a preparation, and then we did meet yesterday in the rehearsal, and I asked you about the first name, but I never noticed the last name. It's quite a shock for me today.
Well, wonderful, thank you.
Now, tell me, let's hear it from you about your top achievements and so far, like we said, and what is it that you're proud of in your career?
Yeah, it's such a great question. It made me, I had to think a little bit and to try and articulate, how do I summarize what are my top achievements? So I started off my career actually as a writer, as a journalist, and I had the amazing opportunity to work at the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg. And so some of my achievements are as a writer, as a journalist, covering different companies. But I'm very grateful for the skills that I picked up there. They have really served me well later in life as well. After that, I worked as a practitioner in the customer experience field. And I think for me, one of my top achievements was really to work with the team. At the time, I was working at Elsevier, publishing company in the Netherlands, and to work with the team there to really establish from scratch customer experience as a discipline, as a team within Elsevier, which was just such an exciting time, and it really gave us an opportunity to create a lot of change within the organization. And that's something that I continue to enjoy, and that we help our clients to do, is really to act as a catalyst for change within organizations. So to be able to be part of that was for me really a tremendous opportunity. And of course, since joining Forrester, I have of course continued in the area of customer experience and broadened my perspective across more industries. You know, similar to Maurice, I think it's been the pleasure of working with so many of our clients to develop the thought leadership that we publish around customer experience. It all happens with our clients, right? We speak to them, we do research, qualitative, quantitative, and from that, of course, comes the great thought leadership that that we publish around customer experience, and then to take that and to also help to apply that within organizations, right? So for me, it's really that combination of thought leadership, and I've been I've pioneered a number of topics within Forrester around journey mapping, as you mentioned, but also journey analytics and some emerging trends, emotion and customer experience. So those are all things that are also things that I'm very passionate about within the area of customer experience, and then to have the pleasure of really applying that to different organizations with our clients and helping them to really again, really drive change within their organizations is really is what I would consider my top achievements. And I hope to be able to continue to do that and continue to reach even bigger achievements.
That's quite colorful career. So it sounds exciting. I envy you on that. So we will go back to you, Joanna, and but I just want to mention that from starting the next questions, I will ask you to just comment on each other's answers, just so we give a bit of more of content in the discussion. Now, Maurice, can you, again, we're still in the past, so can you walk us through the development curve of the CX research methods over the past 10 years? How did the behavioral science tools, methodologies, and framework help maximize the impact of your research?
Yeah, so thank you. That was a really good question, and as Joanna just said, you know, I had to think about this a bit. So, and actually, it's been an interesting journey. So, and I'll give you a few examples of how things changed, and I can, maybe some of the audience around here have actually worked for these companies or so, or been on these programs, but actually. So yeah, if I take a step back, that is, you know, further than the CX magazine, about 15 years ago. So I inherited a mystery shopping team in Kantar. So And at that point in time, that was deemed to be the gold standard of CX, really. So this was all about being objective and to be able to sample to get a balanced result of what CX really looked like. And it gave a true understanding, at least we thought at that time, of the services provided, by a business. So, for instance, our biggest client was the major UK airline at the time. And they were adamant that feedback that you got straight from customers could not be used and couldn't be trusted. Yeah, so they said, customers don't know what to expect rationally, so don't ask them because they'll just mix things up. So instead, the airline needed independent assessors to get a true reading, of customer excellence and customer experience. So Kantar was chosen to check if the plane was clean, if the flight attendant said the right words, if the coffee was hot, etc. So, and it seems the airline at that point in time, they couldn't trust their customers to tell them this directly. They needed an independent assessment. And that was really quite normal, in the area of 2005 to 2010. So how the world has changed since then, basically. So that's where this really started. It was all about the truth and objectiveness. So, but what we then saw, obviously, specifically in, from 2010 onwards, so we saw basically the march of the NPS framework and the use of KPIs more widely. So every customer, every potential customer was looking for a simple KPI that they could use in their scorecard to show how customer-centric they were. They did forget one thing on the whole, is that you actually have to take action. So we did a lot of measuring of likelihood to recommend, customer satisfaction, effort scores, etc., but very, very little actually in terms of advisory to actually follow up on those KPIs. So what you get is that the CX world quickly became a world of rather meaningless KPIs floating around, mainly proving that top-level management was customer-centric. So they could put something in their annual report and say, boom, look at that, likelihood to recommend. Really good, isn't it? And that was it. But there was actually no one at that time actively linking up the activity on the shop floor with these KPIs necessarily. So it was still very, very research-driven. But I think there was really a change, shift change about 5 years ago, say, or maybe a bit longer ago, but where we saw the beginning of the new C-suite roles like CXOs. So what it meant was that customer experience became a real important part of many businesses. So no longer a side issue, but it became the same level as sales, finance, marketing, etc. And that changed the fabric of how CX was viewed and also how CX measurement and advisory and so on was treated, obviously. Because first of all, those CXOs, they could gain access to way more data and input. So we were no longer constrained by survey only. So you had call center data came in, digital data from web chat, sales, financial data, all that kind of stuff. So a rise in volume of data. So, and what that meant then, and this is specifically in the last few years, so CX processes, therefore, they had to move to a more analytics-based approach, really, like customer analytics, text analytics, in order to actually make sense of all the data. You can't eyeball it anymore at some level. So, and that brought us the likes of Qualtrics, Medallia, Clarabridge, CX technologies that really make sense of all your data. So those are really what we've seen over the last 10, 15 years, from my point of view, is where this has gone. But what hasn't changed, though, for us, Kantar specifically, through all those years, is to focus customers on activation and outcome. So, methodologies, technologies, measurement, they only bring you really to an aggregate point of understanding. They don't actually do anything for your business per se. As I said, CEO holding up a KPI at an annual meeting and saying, look at that, that is beautiful at some point, but it doesn't really activate things. So still over the years, the focus has still been, giving businesses advice to help them to really do something with the information they have and create a positive change in their customer experience.
Thank you for that. I mean, that's quite shocking information of 15 years ago, not wanting to listen to the customer, and then going back now to having like.
This was a sample of one, obviously, but this was quite. I'm pretty sure Joanna has examples like this.
Absolutely, and I think we very much sort of see similar things as well in terms of just the speed at which companies, of course, can collect data, the different ways in which they can collect data. But I agree with you that, and of course, there's been an explosion of metrics that many companies have adopted beyond sort of beacon metrics around customer experience, for instance. But I think that the biggest challenge that we still see for the majority of companies in really delivering great customer experience is taking those metrics, as you just described, Maurice, and not just sort of using them and to drive decision making, but doing that across silos within the organization. That is still the single biggest challenge, I think, that companies have. It's actually adopting cross-silo metrics and then using those in that cross-functional way, collaborating across different silos so that you can actually deliver an experience that makes sense from the customer's point of view and that isn't fragmented. So what we're seeing that I think is extremely exciting is also a shift towards different ways of collecting that data, collecting different types of data, collecting metrics across those different silos, often across customer journeys, so that we really get a true picture of what the customer's lived reality is, and not what we think it is or what we assume is the customer's reality, right? That those two things can be very, very different. But I agree with Maurice. I think there's plenty of companies, and we've also seen, for instance, in certain industries more so than others, like for instance in the luxury industry, where there was still until recently very much that attitude of we know the trends better than our customers, and so even asking for feedback from our customers is sort of a no-no. We don't do that because it wouldn't be very luxurious to do that, right? So there's still some industries are actually still catching up to that idea of collecting feedback and doing that increasingly in real time. There's been a big change, absolutely, but I think there's still a continued evolution that needs to happen in terms of how we're using those metrics, and in particular, how we're using them to empower companies to work more cross-functionally. I think that that's still a massive challenge that a lot of companies are really trying to figure out.
Thank you, Joanna. You're navigating the time machine perfectly because you brought us to the past and to the present, actually, and you created a perfect segue for my next question. Now, Maurice, speaking of things at the moment, what are the challenges your clients are facing when it comes to customer experience?
Well, yeah, there's quite a few. So, and Joanna just touched on one big one of that. But first of all, so at the moment, what we see a lot is there are obvious challenges still there from the remnants from the COVID pandemic. So where a lot of our customers have done an ultra quick transition to digitization of services and therefore done it extremely badly. Yeah. So many companies are still fine-tuning the customer service. What they were basically pushed into a digital only channel last year from one day to the other. So, and we found in foundational research that we did in mid-2020 last year that a lot of businesses basically translated their totally analog service into a digital one, like for like, which basically means that it doesn't really work very well from a customer experience point of view. So, and for instance, I work a lot in the automotive sector. It is a difficult one. Yeah. So for decades, automotive has relied on dealerships for their sales. Then from one day to the other, they're all closed everywhere in the world. Now try to replicate that in a digital format. That is not easy, is it? Because the hard product is something you want to touch, you want to see. So still enormous challenges there about that. But slowly, these kinds of industries are also coming to terms with a different digital approach that might actually help them. So more of a hybrid instead of, going full digital. So we see that the hangover of the pandemic. So secondly, and Joanna just touched on that, is the huge volume of customer signals and feedback. So from different silos as well, because of the rise of digital channels. So it does mean automation is no longer a nice to have, but a must have. So call center volumes and chats have tripled or quadrupled in the last year for a number of industries that we serve, like in healthcare, etc. So you can't just eyeball the results and do some stuff around it. So you need real strong processes and frameworks in place to make sure that you deal with these things very, very, very effectively. So, and then thirdly, and I keep coming back to that, but very quickly this time around, the challenge around taking action and realizing ROI from your CX investment. So there's still a lot of customer experience programs around that don't deliver the value because the actions that need to be taken are not necessarily there, or they're not linked to the outcomes of the customer experience programs. And usually that is categorized in two problem areas. So first of all, other priorities taking over, like financial constraints. So you saw that a lot last year. So customer experience starts to take a backseat, and although that's the wrong decision, it did happen. And secondly, it's not empowering the frontline staff. So there's still quite a lot of industries that find it quite hard to, give their frontline customer service people decision-making powers to do stuff. So there is still a hindrance there in some cases as well. So we still see that.
Thanks for that, especially around the empowering of the front staff. We had a meeting 2 days ago for celebrating CX Day, and there was an interesting story about like trying to impose a culture overnight with empowering staff, which went terribly wrong. But then when they took all the necessary steps, it showed results. Now, I have a question for Joanna, and we'll go a bit into the future, if you may. So can you tell us what is next in your research around journeys and around emotion?
Yes, absolutely. So that's a topic that so my research has been very much focused on the intersection between emotion and customer journeys. So we know from our data at Forrester that customer experience is made up of what we call the 3 E's of customer experience: effectiveness, ease, and emotion. But we know that emotion is the biggest driver of loyalty. So we've been doing a deep dive into what does that actually mean in practice, right? So one thing is understanding what the overarching emotion is that a customer has, or the sentiment, but how do we make that more tangible? How do we make it more concrete? And so in order to do that, we've been looking at emotion and how that plays out in journeys. And emotion at the end of the day is just, their emotions are impulses to act, right? So coming back to sort of taking action, we have certain emotions that actually drive certain actions. So if we can understand that emotion and we can understand the emotional curve of customer journeys from their perspective, then we have a much better chance of really understanding how we really sort of manage and orchestrate that experience for the customer in a way that drives that emotional engagement, which we know then drives loyalty and drives trust, right, with the customer. One of the things, so we've done a lot of research about the emotional makeup of journeys, for instance, right? How do customers arrive at a journey? What's the emotional curve? And what is what we call the emotional punch of a journey? What's the story that they tell after they've engaged with you and they have signed up for a mortgage, or they've maybe bought some pet food, right? So different journeys that have also different complexities, different intensities to them. And if you like, the next stage of that research, which we actually just launched very recently, is actually looking at the role of friction in journeys. Now, and I am of the opinion that companies have gone a little bit too far in creating frictionless experiences. And frictionless experiences, of course, are great. Nobody's saying that, sort of removing friction isn't good, but we can go too far in doing that. And actually, if you remove all friction, then there's very little emotional engagement, right? And in some circumstances, a little bit of friction can actually be extremely productive, both for the customer and for the company. Asking for more information, taking an extra step so somebody has an actual moment to pause and consider the decision that they're making. Let's say that you're ordering something on Amazon and it's actually a gift for your sister, but the experience is so frictionless, so fast, so sleek that you forget to even change the address where the present needs to be delivered. And so that present gets delivered to your house rather than your sister's house, missing her birthday, right? Examples like that, that's just sort of like a very simple example, but there are situations in which if we actually look at friction and we use it contextually and adequately, it drives emotional engagement, which in turn drives trust and loyalty behaviors like retention and like advocacy. So we are doing a lot of research about what does good friction mean, right? That's what we refer to it as good friction, where there's bad friction, there's sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And we obviously want to remove bad. We don't want friction, for instance, in service journeys. That would be really ugly friction. But we do want to use good friction in such a way that it drives emotional engagement, drives trust, and drives brand advocates. So that's a big focus for our research at the moment. It's an exciting one as well. It's a little bit of a challenging one as well, because a lot of people, of course, think friction bad. We need to remove friction. And so we use the word friction a little bit provocatively as well, to kind of challenge people to think differently about how they design customer journeys and how that drives emotional engagement, different emotions like confidence and sense of worthiness, creativity, etc. So that's the focus of my research at the moment.
Well, you did provoke some thoughts with me, because I've never looked at friction in that way. So can you tell us about more on when and where can we expect to read a bit more from you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've just published a report on good friction, what it is, how to design for it, the different emotions that it actually drives, and I've just done a presentation on that at our customer experience conference that was last week. But there's also a blog post that is available for anyone who would like to read that, on our website on forrester.com. So if you're interested in the topic and you want to read about it, then you can access. Everyone can access the blog post on this particular topic. And yeah, I'd love to get comments, questions. We think it's an exciting piece of research, and we hope to get a lot of feedback about it.
Perfect. And I'm pretty sure Vanessa is taking notes as the editor to do a feature on that. She'll probably get in touch with you.
No problem.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love the topic. I attended the briefing the other day, and I will come to you with questions.
Wonderful.
People love it.
Okay, let's go back to Maurice, and we're in the future gear now. So in 2020, Cantor published CX Plus report. And the basic premise of CX Plus is that brands and customer experience are aligned. So what does that mean for the future of customer experience?
Yeah, thank you. So it's a really good question, and it actually has some parallels with what Joanna was talking about earlier with the friction, which is actually quite nice to call that out as a positive, I find. So our CX Plus research was really to look at how brands compare to each other in terms of success, looking through the lens of the customer experience that they deliver. So, and the findings were quite spectacular. So it was brands who were deemed to deliver great experiences actually grew 10 times quicker than brands that didn't deliver that type of experience. So, and this was a large study in 15 countries in a variety of industries and so on. So it was very well founded. Now, what this did was really, and this comes to the cross-functional bit of CX, an eye-opener for marketeers specifically. So customer experience had never been seen as a tool in the toolbox of marketeers in the sense that customer experience can actually influence your brand value, your brand perception, but it does. So even more so, we actually found that only 25% of brand building can be attributed to advertising overall. The rest is actually attributed to how you feel about a brand during touch points and experiences. So actually, the experience, the brand experience, is actually a way bigger lever in brand building than marketeers and other people have originally thought. So therefore, what you see now is that the interest in customer experience, becomes way broader across customer organizations. So then our CX Plus study also delved deeper into the types of experience that really help a brand grow. And we saw that, even experience is close to the brand promise, then the preference for your brand is, twofold increasing compared to other situations. So the key takeout of this particular research is the experience gap. So, it's the gap between your brand promise and how you feel about the brand when you experience it. So, and that has to be aligned to be successful. So you can deliver super customer experience, but that do nothing for your brand because it's not what your brand stands for at all. And therefore, it's not a waste of time necessarily, but doesn't actually build the momentum that your investment actually warrants. So you need to think about your brand position when you design your customer journey specifically. So, and if that aligns, then great success will follow. So for us, the focus, the lens is really on, starting to create more of a view of that customer experience is not a standalone thing. Customer experience is actually one of the bigger influences in how you build your brand over time and create brand value for an organization.
Wow, that's incredible. And 25% is a surprising number for me.
Yes. So we see in automotive specifically, we actually see that one of the biggest building blocks of brand is seeing the car on the road is actually, and after that it's test drive and dealerships and so on, but actually physically seeing the car has got an enormous positive reinforcement on how you see a brand, for instance.
Wow, that's incredible. Good insight. Let's go back to Joanna. So now I want to connect another research that 2 years ago, Forrester published a report on the future of CX. And that was 2 years ago, right before the pandemic. And then we witnessed the future that no one couldn't.
It was all wrong. No, I'm kidding.
No. However, in that report, you did predict that the base of customer experience will be neuroscience, AI, and anthropology. And this turned out to be very true in the context of current crisis, when more than ever we need to understand humans and to empathize.
Yes.
So how much of the predictions you made in 2019 have changed because of the pandemic, or have they changed at all?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think we have absolutely seen that neuroscience, AI, anthropology, psychology has become incredibly important. It was already we already saw so many companies investing in new skills in those areas, but of course also investing in artificial intelligence in order to understand behaviors more quickly and also predict future behaviors, or what we call next best experiences, even more accurately. But we saw that, huge acceleration in that during the pandemic, obviously, and companies that had actually invested in technologies that allowed them to do that really had an advantage in being able to sort of adapt to those behaviors and to predict the future behaviors as well. I think, obviously a lot, nobody could have expected exactly what happened during the pandemic. I think it took us all by surprise. I think that, some things, obviously, Maurice has already referred to, like, the huge digitization of experiences, for instance, right? The huge amount of things that we suddenly do on digital channels and will continue to do on digital channels, right? That's a massive change. But also, At the same time, the role of customer service became incredibly important because suddenly customers had more complex questions that they were trying to solve in digital channels that they had not been using for very long. And so they needed to speak to a human being in order to deal with those more complex questions. So one of the things that we predicted, for instance, was that the role of customer service, we've seen this in our data year after year, that customer service as a driver of customer experience is incredibly important. And in some ways, despite the digitization of customer experience, we saw that indeed customer service became a lifeline for so many customers, right? So voice, phone, chatbots, combination of all those things became absolutely paramount to actually continuing to deliver business for customers. So I think that that was something that, if anything, was again sort of amplified by the pandemic. I think another thing that we predicted as well was a surge in positions like chief customer officer or other positions that have a customer experience responsibility. And of course, we've seen a big division between companies that stopped investing in customer experience, but also companies that really accelerated their investments in customer experience. We've seen a surge in those positions. And again, I think that uplift in customer experience, but also a realization from a lot of companies that they really needed to take a much more disciplined approach to customer experience, particularly during a pandemic where there was really an opportunity as well to be there, to show customers that they were going to, that brand was going to be there for them, right? And to reinforce some of that brand promise that Maurice was also referring to. So we've seen that uplift in customer experience, customers flocking to brands that they feel that they can trust, when it comes to in-person experiences, because as much as we've digitized so much of the experience that we have with brands, there is such a thing as digital saturation as well. So many of us also still, and increasingly crave those, physical experiences, seeing the product, touching the product, as Maurice just referred to, seeing it on the road, right? So those physical experiences to sort of balance out some of that massive digitization is incredibly important. One of the interesting things that we saw that we couldn't have necessarily predicted, I mean, if you think about it a little bit, perhaps, but was, and obviously this is linked to the research that I do around emotion, is that we've seen that the emotions that matter most during the pandemic are emotions like, for instance, confidence. And of course, that makes sense if you think about it. In times of uncertainty, if you design for confidence, then customers are going to really appreciate that, right? So there's been this kind of shift in what emotions matter most. How do we design for those emotions, which I think has been fascinating. So for those companies that did invest in anthropology and psychology and neuroscience and in behavioral analysis, they were again at an advantage if they could have picked up on those signs that, for instance, designing for confidence was incredibly important during the pandemic. So I'm sure that not all of our predictions came true because we couldn't have predicted a pandemic of the scale that we've just been going through, but some of them absolutely, I think, hold water. And in fact, if anything, were amplified by what happened in the past year.
That's incredible. And when you put AI and anthropology or neuroscience in the same sentence, AI is not there to replace humans. It's there to empower them. What's your take on this, Maurice? If any?
Yeah, no, I think Joanna's predictions were quite, on the mark. We've as a business, that is all about customer understanding. Emotion has always been a focal point for how we treat, customer experience. And I can't agree more with what you said around that. If that is what you focus on, then those are the things you really get the benefit from. So, and I still come back to the previous element of the friction. So the friction gives you a touch point with your customer, which then creates an opportunity for you to show empathy, which is the latest buzzword, and you see more and more. And so again, I think all those things you can digitize too much, you can self-serve too much. We've seen quite a few good examples over the last few months, you know, where you actually lose touch with your customers because of this, and positive friction is most likely one part of those, where you pull some of that back to actually be able to show your face to your customers about, you know, what you stand for, how you can reinforce your brand, what we talked about, etc. So.
All right. Well, speaking of predictions, Maurice, what sort of predictions can we make to better prepare for CX, for customer experience in the following, let's say, 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, and I think a lot of them we touched already on, and actually Joanna's predictions for the next 2 years from 2 years ago were actually really good, and they still stand, I think. So first of all, what we see now, and what you will see even more, is channel proliferation, basically. So customers will demand more different ways of contacting brands, getting in touch with brands, and being serviced by brands. So chat, WhatsApp, email, phone, whatever it might be. But they're expecting similar outcomes. So, and that is really the trick. So regardless of how they communicate with you, you'll have to provide them with a seamless service. So, and that sounds simple, but actually from a customer service technology point of view, that's actually quite hard to get, you know, a level type of experience, you know, regardless of how a customer actually gets to you. And you see a lot of companies struggling with that. Yeah, there's prime examples of this. So if you have a complaint to an airline, the best thing to do is go on Twitter and you jump the queue immediately with your problem. Yeah, so that is a prime example of, you know, how channels are not treated the same necessarily, which obviously, if you're in another queue, is then giving negative friction, most likely in Joanna's book. So that is a huge issue, I think, in the next coming years. So we already talked a lot about, you know, more data being available, obviously, for CX professionals, and technology and AI. So I don't think we have to go over that. So I think the broader trend from a skill set is an interesting one. So customer experience, what you see is becoming central to business success. You know, we've showed that with our CX Plus. Joanna showed that in her studies. So, and good customer service is related to good business outcomes. We know that now. So it's no longer a sideshow. So what you get is that brand people, marketeers, salespeople, they all want to have a slice of this CX pie and some influence in it. So, and that's great news if you're a CXO, obviously. But it also means that you have to start interacting a lot better with other parts of the business and breaking down those silos that Joanne was earlier talking about. And that's a new way of working. A lot of customer experience professionals have been able to operate in a bit of a vacuum, a bit on the left, on the right hand side of the main business, and that'll disappear. So I think it most likely needs a different skill set, you know, or a growing skill set for CXOs to be more central and more, you know, across the silos than has been the case. So, and then, yeah, finally, it was really around the empathy part. So I went to another conference this week and one the previous week, and the first word that was on the slides was empathy. So customer service is very often formulaic nowadays because of the digitization as well. So, but it needs to be a bit more driven by empathy. So empathy of frontline employees is what makes them stand out in how they treat customers and how they solve problems. So, and empathy is massively appreciated by customers, not only in a pandemic situation, but also now as well. So, you know, so two things around that. You have to empower your frontline people that they can show empathy and can actually take actions. Yeah, but also, and I think that's an interesting part, you know, most people that are CXO levels and higher will want to get a metric on empathy at some point, or a KPI. So I don't know what that's going to look like. Joanne might already have one, even you never know. But I think in the end, it will become a harder metric most likely than what we see now. So let's see how that evolves.
Thank you, Maurice. Now we have 6 minutes left. I wanted to ask Joanna if she has anything to comment on this.
Yeah, I think the only thing, sort of like a couple of things I would add. I mean, so yes, obviously empathy, hugely important. How we actually measure that, I think will become indeed sort of an area that, already a lot of people, of course, are looking into, but I think increasingly so. I think from a skill set, I think training employees in general around emotional intelligence will become a huge area of focus going forward. And also sort of, in the context of more digitization and, actually sort of making sure that we really use the skill set and the capital, the human capital that we have within organizations to drive things like creativity, but also to drive things like empathy, which will require a very different type of training around emotional intelligence, around sort of, different ways of being creative and of collaborating. So I think that that's going to become very important. I think companies will continue to double down on improving employee experience. It's obviously already been increasing sort of slowly, but I think there's sort of with the future of work and so many companies changing their model of working, I think that that's going to become, of course, continue to be a huge theme. It's like, what does this future of work look like? Which skill sets do we need? How do we work together? How do we combine? How do we work in a hybrid environment, which in some ways is harder than just a virtual one, right? When you suddenly have people in physical space and in a virtual space, that actually is a much harder thing to manage. So how are we going to do that going forward? I think that that's a really important one. And to sort of add to what Maurice was saying about data, obviously, we already talked about that technology. I think that one of the things that's going to be incredibly important is actually really understanding customers' privacy needs, right? So really doubling down as well on, for instance, things like consent journeys. How do we get consent from customers to use their data in a way that they see the value of what they're going to get out of that trade-off, that they're sharing data for a reason. So, and I think there's a lot of companies that have not paid enough attention yet to that. How do we actually understand different privacy needs and then design those, what we call consent journeys, in such a way that we can actually use that friction in a responsible way that that really sort of drives engagement. So those are some of the ones that I'm sort of keeping an eye on.
Thank you, Joanna. And now we have received a number of questions, very interesting questions from the audience. One is about the logo on my shirt, which is Awards International, the same as on my background. Now, one of the questions was concerning the AI and the regulation. I know it's not really fully your field, but just if you can give me a short answer now, should we be concerned about the Elon Musk's comments, how AI will be better than us in everything, or do you think we should regulate it, or should we not be concerned? If you're comfortable commenting on this.
Well, I'm comfortable commenting on anything, but I'm not an authority on it. So first of all, so CX is not the forefront of AI. So AI, if you look at the giant applications in AI, they are in financial services, for instance, etc. So because there's money to be made in that kind of stuff. So hence the problems around AI and the ethical elements will first be there, specifically around what Joanna said as well, around the the more ethical privacy elements and how far you can go with that. AI will have a role to play. I'm personally, I'm thinking a bit about the friction story again as well. There is a human element specifically to customer experience, no matter how you twist or turn it in what we do. So, but nothing that will remain.
Yeah, absolutely. We have just 2 minutes left. Joanna, I'm going to skip you on this question because we did tell you we have prepared some rapid fire questions for you. Like, these are very quick answers because we want to stick to the schedule. Now, we're just going to do one question and I will ask Vanessa to give it. It was a surprise question.
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you, Joanna and Maurice. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I have just shortly to add that I'm an anthropologist myself, so I just had a million questions in my head, but I will save them for another time. So my surprise question now for you, and I will start with Maurice. You need to finish this sentence. My birthday wishes to CXM.
I couldn't hear the question. Sorry about that.
It's my birthday wishes to Customer Experience Magazine. Finish the sentence, please.
I hope successfully another 100 years for you.
Thank you. And Joanna, your birthday wishes to CXM.
My birthday wish is that you maybe can all sort of meet in person at some point soon, because I know that you're all spread all over virtually, so that would be nice probably for some team building, and that you have continued to build your following massively over the next 100 years to add to Maurice's.
Thank you so much. This is wonderful.
Thank you, both of you.
I have to say, what a wonderful session. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed every moment of it. In fact, this CXTV thing, I can't turn it off. So I'm sure we're going to get a lot of airplay following on from this, and I couldn't think of two more eminent people to join us. So well done, and thank you very much. Well done to Vanessa and Alexander, but thank you very much to Maurice and Joanna for doing this for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joining
Thank
back.
you so much.
Thank you so much. I have learned a lot, and like Vanessa said, I have so many follow-up questions. So we should do this again.